Now, tanks are not exactly the class people attend awakening ceremonies to see. Swordsmen cut monsters apart. Mages destroy entire battlefields. Tanks hold up a shield, absorb damage, and wait for someone more impressive to finish the fight. They are useful. They're just not exciting. Haru was supposed to awaken something far more exciting. At 19.7%, he had the highest mental potential Stone Bay Central had ever recorded. Everyone expected an S-rank combat class. Then Haru entered the awakening array. White light climbed around him, flickered once, and collapsed. A plain gray shield appeared beside Haru's name. A C-rank class awakened. Anchor guard. One guild recruiter closed his folder. Some students laughed. After years of being called Stone Bay's future genius, Haru had awakened the weakest shield class among the school's elite candidates. But Haru was not looking at the gray shield. He was staring at a hidden bar nobody else could see. It had appeared 3 years ago, and that morning it had read 99.9%. Now it was full. A clear voice sounded inside his mind. Max level skill unlocked. Direct damage limit 1. Before Haru could examine the skill, the verification golem beside the stage began to shake. The machine was supposed to test new defenders with one level 1 strike. Instead, its core turned red, one safety chain snapped, and it faced the students. Pan was in the first row, trying to pull 2 younger students away from a fallen bench. Behind them, dozens more were trapped between the seats and the closed doors. The instructors raised emergency barriers, but they were too slow. The golem had already drawn back a fist meant to test veteran defenders. Haru could have run with everyone else. Instead, he picked up the simple iron shield his class had created and stepped between the golem and Pan. Everyone thought the humiliation had broken him. Haru knew something they did not. He lifted his shield. The golem attacked. Its fist drove Haru through the awakening platform. Stone burst across the hall. The front of the stage folded inward, and a crater opened beneath his feet. Pan stopped pulling at the bench. Instructors waited for the emergency ward to flare around Haru. It never did. A G-sense fact that is never way of their actual menimus and embrace their menace. Then broken stone shifted in the crater. Haru stood up. His uniform was torn at one shoulder. His new shield was still raised. His health had fallen by exactly 1 point. The head instructor checked the control panel. The veteran-level strike had landed cleanly, and no ward had protected him. The weakest shield awakened that day had just stopped an attack meant for someone more than 20 levels stronger. Everyone else was speechless. Haru was not surprised. The message had told him exactly what would happen. Then a red warning appeared. Pressure level 92%. Protection will fail if pressure becomes full. The golem pulled its fist out of the crater and raised it again. That was when Haru understood the part his first message had left out. The missing damage had not disappeared. The skill had trapped the force inside him, and one hit had nearly filled whatever limit he possessed. If the next strike pushed pressure to 100%, his protection would switch off. The same fist that had taken 1 health point could take all the rest. A new instruction appeared. Touch stable ground for 3 seconds to release pressure. Haru dropped his free hand against the broken platform. 3 seconds sounded simple until a veteran golem was trying to punch him. The machine stepped forward. 1. Its arm descended. 2. Haru felt his palm grow hot. Cracks spread through the stone beneath his fingers. The golem's fist was almost on top of him. 3. The trapped force poured out of Haru and into the platform. The entire stage jumped. Dodbeat stone split beneath the golem's front foot, throwing its second strike off course. The fist missed Haru by less than an arm's length and buried itself in the crater wall. Before it could pull free, the instructor shut down its core. The red light faded. The machine stopped moving. Haru checked the hidden meter. Pressure level 0. Second breath restored the single health point almost immediately. With the immediate danger gone, Haru could finally read the rest of the hidden notice. The 3-year meter belonged to a talent called 10th Step. It did not replace his C-rank class. Instead, it guaranteed him one highest grade profession skill at level 10, then another every 10 levels after that. Becoming full for the first time had also granted an early activation reward, one random skill already at its maximum level. That skill was Impact Ledger. The class everyone could see really was ordinary. The talent hidden beneath it was anything but ordinary. Pan finally climbed over the broken bench and ran to the crater. He looked at Haru, then at the disabled golem, then back at Haru. Please tell me your new class also comes with an explanation. Haru stepped over a slab of broken stone, not a useful one. That answer did not satisfy Pan, but the instructors reached them before he could ask anything else. They checked Haru for hidden equipment and illegal charms. They found nothing. Haru said his new passive had reduced the strike, which was true. He simply left out its grade, the pressure meter, and the fact that it had already reached its maximum level. The school briefly paused the ceremony while workers sealed off the broken platform. When the awakening resumed, every person in the hall was watching Haru instead of laughing at him. Then Nami stepped into the repaired array, and attention shifted again. Her light did not flicker. "You are!" It rose to the ceiling in a pillar of gold. A spear of condensed sunlight formed above her, and the heat was strong enough to make the nearest instructors step back. Double S rank class awakened. Sunlancer. Stone Bay Province had not produced a double S rank awakening in almost a decade. Guild recruiters who had closed their folders for Haru were suddenly standing. Messages were already being sent before Nami left the platform. The contrast could not have been sharper. Nami had received one of the strongest defensive classes in the province. Haru had received a C-rank shield that the school records described as reliable and ordinary. Only Haru knew that ordinary shield had just changed the rules of damage. The problem was that his official team now looked ridiculous. Months earlier, the school had given Haru a funded team charter after he placed first in mental potential. He had named the team Northline and registered 4 members based on their training results. Haru was captain. Nami, Daniel, and Craig filled the remaining positions. Now Northline contained a C-rank captain, a double S-rank lancer, an S-rank warbreaker, and an A-rank tide mage. Haru expected a difficult conversation. Daniel did not even wait until they left the hall. He approached with Craig beside him and stopped in front of Haru. Daniel was tall, neatly dressed, and still wearing the red mark his S-rank awakening had left across one hand. "Transfer the captain position," he said, "then remove yourself from the active roster." Han, who had been celebrating his own B-rank Shadow Scout class, slowly lowered both hands. "You could at least pretend that was a request." Daniel ignored him. His attention stayed on Haru. "The provincial selection uses small teams. Nami has a real chance at one of the 2 places. Northline needs a captain whose rank will not disqualify the entire group before the assessment begins." Craig held out a single silver coin. "Take this as compensation for the name in the paperwork." Haru looked at the coin. The legal charter had cost the school 40,000 silver. They had paid because Haru earned the highest potential score in school history. Daniel and Craig were offering him enough to buy lunch, then asking him to hand over the team and disappear. "You both want to leave?" Haru asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "We want you to act reasonably." "That was not my question." Craig lowered the coin. "The charter was funded for all of us." "It was funded through my award. I filed it, named it, and accepted the captain's responsibility. If you think Northline is beneath you, leaving is easy." Daniel took one step closer. "Do not let one lucky defensive skill make you confused about your position." Haru almost smiled. Daniel had just asked him to surrender his team because rank should decide everything, yet he was also dismissing the one result that did not fit his ranking system. There was no point arguing. Haru opened the team screen and removed Daniel. Then he removed Craig. Both men received the notice at the same time. Craig stared at his empty roster. Daniel's face became completely still. Being removed by a captain was considered an insult. Most people left voluntarily before that could happen. Haru slid his screen away. "There, now the charter is no longer holding either of you back." Students nearby had gone silent again. By the end of one ceremony, Haru had survived a veteran golem and expelled the 2 strongest men from his own team. Daniel leaned close enough that only Haru and Pan could hear him. "The trial zones are large. Do not expect school rules to protect you outside the city." "If that is meant to scare me," Haru said, "you should try saying it without 3 instructors behind you." Daniel turned away before his anger became more obvious. Nami was standing directly in his path. His expression changed at once. "You saw what happened," Daniel said. "Craig and I are forming a new selection team. An S-rank Warbreaker, an A-rank Tide Mage, and a double S-rank Sunlancer would give Stone Bay its strongest possible front line." Nami glanced at the silver coin still in Craig's hand. "No. Yeah." Daniel seemed to think she had misunderstood. "You should consider what the special selection could mean." "I already did." She walked around him and stopped beside Haru. Daniel looked back once, but there was nothing else he could say without making the rejection worse. He left with Craig as whispers followed them through the hall. Haru waited until they were gone. "You know staying makes you part of the ridiculous team." "Only from a distance," Nami said. "Up close, I saw you remain calm when the array failed, protect the students, and remove 2 people who tried to take your team. Those are captain decisions." Her answer was practical, but there was another reason. During mental training, Nami's power had a habit of surging whenever she lost focus. Several instructors told her to suppress it by force. Haru had shown her how to break the feedback into smaller sensations and control them one at a time. It was a simple exercise, but it had stopped her from blacking out during training. That morning, the same method had kept her Sunlancer awakening stable. "I trust how you think under pressure," she continued. "Your public rank does not change that." Haru appreciated the answer. It also made him more certain that he could not team with her yet. Pan reached the same problem from the other direction. North line has 2 open positions, he said. I happen to know a talented shadow scout with excellent hair. You are the only shadow scout standing here. That does narrow the search. Haru shook his head. Not today. Pan's smile faded. Because I am B rank? Because I do not understand what happened to the platform. Pressure release had cracked several layers of stone. Haru did not know whether that force could injure someone beside him, collapse unstable ground, or trigger without warning. Testing it while Pan stood within reach would be reckless. I need 1 day alone, Haru said. After that, I will know what I can safely do. Pan studied him for a moment, then nodded. 1 day. If you vanish into Westwood and become a monster's lunch, I am going to be extremely annoying at your funeral. A citywide bell cut through the hall before Haru could answer. The national trial had begun. For the next 30 days, every newly awakened fighter in the country could earn levels, clear dungeons, and compete on daily rankings. The results decided guild offers, government placements, and entry to advanced academies. In Stone Bay, the western gates opened toward the city's beginner hunting grounds. Hundreds of new fighters rushed for the equipment district. Haru went with them alone. The first thing he bought was a blade. That earned almost as many strange looks as his awakening. Anchor guards normally spent everything on heavier armor and larger shields. Haru chose a plain, one-handed sword with a strength rune already fitted into the handle. His class had given him plenty of health and very little attack power. Adding more defense to a body that could reduce a veteran strike to 1 point made no sense. Of course, nobody in the shop knew that. They saw a disgraced C-rank tank buying offensive gear he could barely use. 2 separate teams offered him a place as their shield carrier. Haru declined both and left Stone Bay before the jokes became repetitive. Westwood began less than a mile beyond the wall. The marked beginner routes passed through wide grass fields and clusters of old trees painted with blue safety symbols. Now, most new fighters stayed close to those marks, moving in groups of 3 or 4. Haru walked until the city noise disappeared. His first monster found him beside a shallow stream. A hornback burst from the brush, lowered the thick plate covering its head, and charged. It was level 1, broad as a dog and fast enough to knock an unprepared fighter off his feet. Haru planted his new shield and let it hit him. The impact pushed his boots through the dirt. His health did not move. Direct damage, 0. Pressure level, 2%. That answered the first question. If an attack was weaker than his constitution, it caused no health damage and barely added pressure. Haru struck the hornback behind its front leg. His damage was terrible, but the monster could not hurt him. After several clean cuts, it collapsed and left behind a small core. He had proven the basic rule. So naturally, he went looking for something stronger. A level 2 boulder hare was waiting near the next ridge. Despite the harmless name, it was almost chest-high, with stone growths along its shoulders and rear legs powerful enough to crack a tree. Haru gave it a clear path. The hare launched itself at him. 1 health point vanished. Pressure jumped to 18%. Haru smiled. Oh! A stronger enemy still could not deal more than 1 direct damage point. Better yet, second breath restored the missing health while he fought. The boulder hare kicked him twice more. Haru stopped trying to dodge. He focused on cutting through 1 rear tendon, knowing he could take every hit until the monster fell. It was exactly the kind of unfair advantage he had imagined. Then the grass around him began to click. Small black shapes rose from 3 different patches at once. Needle bats. There were more than 30 of them. Haru barely had time to lift his shield before the flock folded around him. 1 bat struck his neck. Another bit his wrist. 3 more hit his back in separate bursts. The bats were weak, but the needle tips on their jaws focused each impact into 1 tiny point. Their piercing power was just high enough to cross Haru's constitution. 1 point. 1 point. 1 point. Impact Ledger limited each attack, but it treated every bite as a separate event. The hits came too quickly to count. Worse, every collision added a little pressure. The meter climbed past 40%, then 60, while Haru was still trying to clear space around his face. The boulder hare recovered and kicked him through the swarm. Pressure level, 84%. Second breath weakened. Haru hit the ground, pressed 1 hand into the soil, and began counting. 1 bat struck his wrist and knocked his palm out of the soil before he reached 1 second. The release stopped. He tried again behind his shield. A bat hit his elbow and broke his contact with the ground. Pressure passed 90%. For the first time since the golem attack, Haru felt real fear. 1 powerful monster was almost harmless if it attacked slowly. A swarm could fill his meter through dozens of tiny hits, then tear him apart the moment his protection failed. He could not outlast them. He needed 3 quiet seconds. Boulder hare charged again. Instead of bracing, Haru turned his shield and let the monster strike at an angle. The blow threw him toward a pale standing stone near the stream. He hit it shoulder first, losing 1 health point, then kept moving until his back was against the rock. The needle bats followed. Haru raised his sword into the sunlight. The polished blade flashed across the flock. Needle bats hunted by watching rapid movement and hated sudden glare. The front row scattered, but the ones behind kept coming. Haru kicked a sheet of dry dirt into the air. The dust turned the flock into chaos. Collided with one another, their clicking calls bouncing in every direction. Haru placed his palm flat against the standing stone. 1. A bat cut through the dust and struck his cheek. He kept his hand still. 2. And the boulder hair bounded toward him, dragging its injured leg. 3. Pressure level 97%. Release complete. The standing stone cracked from top to bottom. Dust burst from its base, but the force traveled into the buried rock instead of exploding around Haru. Pressure fell to 0. Haru moved immediately. He stepped around the stone, let the boulder hair crash into it, and cut the monster's damaged leg as it fell. The hair stopped moving after 2 more strikes. Without the larger monster stirring them up, the needle bats lost interest and scattered toward the trees. Haru stood beside the split stone, breathing harder than he had after the veteran golem. His health was still well above half. That was not the frightening part. He had reached 97% pressure against individual creatures, other beginners treated as pests. Impact Ledger was powerful, but it had rules sharp enough to kill him. Haru committed 3 of them to memory. Avoid swarms whenever possible. Choose enemies with heavy, slower attacks. And before any fight, identify stable ground or a fixed structure he could use to release pressure. Once he understood that, his ideal target became obvious. He needed something much stronger than a level 1 fighter was supposed to face. Haru followed broken shrubs and deep hoof marks beyond the most crowded beginner routes. The trail ended in a clearing where a granite boar was tearing bark from an old ironwood tree. The monster was level 3. Stone plates covered its shoulders, and each tusk was almost as long as Haru's forearm. A normal pair of level 1 fighters would have turned around without making a sound. Haru checked the clearing instead. The ironwood tree had roots thicker than his waist. Large, fixed structure. Good. The boar noticed him and charged. Haru met the first impact with his shield. 1 health point disappeared. Pressure rose by 31%. The strike sent him backward, but the boar's tusk caught in the rim of his shield for half a second. Haru twisted free and cut the back of its left leg. The blade barely passed through the hide. Low attack power was still low attack power. The boar wheeled around for another charge. Haru moved to the ironwood, touched 1 heel to the exposed root, and watched the monster lower its head. It attacked. He received the charge, stepped inside the tusks, and struck the same leg. The boar skidded past him. Its weight took several seconds to stop. Haru pressed his foot against the root. 1. Boar turned. 2. It scraped 1 hoof through the soil. 3. The trapped pressure drained into the ironwood. Leaves shook above him, but the ancient roots held. That gave Haru a rhythm. Receive 1 charge. Cut the rear leg. Use the boar's recovery time to release pressure. Move before it attacked again. The fight was not quick and it was not flashy. It was controlled. After the 5th charge, the boar's left leg began to drag. After the 8th, it could no longer turn cleanly. Haru stopped attacking its armor and drove his blade beneath the jaw when it stumbled past him. The granite boar collapsed beside the ironwood. Only then did Haru hear someone exhale behind the bushes. A young spearfighter and a healer were standing at the edge of the clearing. Both looked exhausted, and both had clearly arrived expecting to rescue him. The spearfighter checked Haru's public information, then checked it again. C rank anchor guard? Haru pulled his blade free. That is what the ceremony said. You controlled a level 3 granite boar by yourself. It turned slowly. The explanation only made the pair more confused. They had watched the boar strike Haru again and again. They had also watched him walk away from every impact with no visible injury. Even beginners knew that a C-rank anchor guard should not have controlled that fight. Haru collected the boar's core and found a small strength rune lodged beside it. He fitted the rune into his sword while the witnesses were still trying to decide what to ask. Then he moved on before the conversation could become dangerous. The next several hours passed in a blur. Haru no longer tested every monster. He selected them. Solitary hornbacks were safe, but slow. Boulder hares were better. Heavy shell crawlers gave good experience, but only if he flipped them near a tree and attacked the softer underside. He skipped every flock, nest, and pack he sensed. His clothes suffered more than his body did. Claws tore the fabric, impacts covered him in dirt, and 1 shell crawler ripped most of his left sleeve away. Second breath kept his health near full, but it did nothing for his uniform. By early afternoon, the level-up chime sounded. Haru reached level 2. His constitution and mental strength increased sharply. His health pool grew, and second breath became stronger. Since pressure capacity followed mental strength, its meter gained more room as well. That changed the value of every fight. Heavy attacks still caused only one damage point, but now they filled a smaller portion of the larger meter. The granite bore, that once required a release after every 2 or 3 charges, would be easier the next time. Haru looked west. Blue marks on the trees showed the edge of Stone Bay's safe routes. Beyond them lay the Ashwild, an older forest where the city no longer cleared every dangerous monster. New fighters were warned not to cross the line during their first week. Haru had been awakened for less than a day. He stepped past the final blue tree. The Ashwild was quieter than Westwood. Gray dust covered the ground beneath black-barked trees, and old roots pushed through the soil like ribs. Haru slowed down, checking for stable stone and thick trunks as he moved. He found 2 level 3 monsters before the light began to change. A hook-clawed lizard taught him that being dragged was not the same as being damaged. A moss ram showed him that a creature could pin his shield even when it could not break his body. He won both fights, but neither was easy. The experience bar moved close to level 3. Then something cut his right arm. The attack was so fast that Haru saw the blood before he saw the creature. 1 health point vanished. You! A second message appeared beside it. Ash venom detected. Damage every second. Numbness increasing. Haru turned toward the dead leaves. 2 pale eyes opened beneath them. The ash viper rose almost to his height. It was level 4. The first poison tick landed. 1 health point. Then another. Haru's hidden meter began to climb. The viper circled him without hurrying. Its first bite had already done what it needed to do. It could wait for the poison to weaken him, then strike when his movements became slow. Haru had hoped Impact Ledger might erase venom along with the bite. Instead, every poison tick counted as a new damage event. Worse, the skill stopped health loss. It did not stop the numbness spreading from his forearm into his fingers. Haru tightened his grip on the sword. The viper lunged. He blocked the fangs with his shield, but the force knocked him sideways. The poison ticked again. Pressure passed 40%. Second breath restored some health, then weakened as pressure crossed 80. The damage itself remained small. The pattern was lethal. If Haru stood there trading attacks, his hand would become useless, pressure would reach 100%, and the viper's next bite would land without protection. He needed to end the fight before his body stopped obeying him. Haru scanned the ground. The soil was loose ash. No buried stone. The nearest healthy tree was too narrow to absorb or release safely. But 10 steps behind him stood a dead ironwood. Half its roots were exposed, and rot had opened a dark seam along the trunk. Haru moved toward it. The viper followed, staying just beyond the reach of his sword. The numbness reached Haru's wrist. He loosened his fingers before they locked around the handle, then switched the sword to his left hand. The viper saw the clumsy movement and attacked. Haru leaned aside at the last moment. Fangs missed his shoulder and drove into the dead tree. The trunk cracked. The viper pulled free, leaving 2 deep holes in the rotten wood. Haru struck the same place with his sword. Oh! His left-handed cut was weak, but it widened the split. Poison continued ticking. Pressure level, 89%. The viper recoiled, then whipped its tail around Haru's ankles. He fell hard. The impact dealt no damage, but the creature wrapped around his legs and began dragging him away from the tree. Impact Ledger could not stop restraint. Haru drove the edge of his shield against the viper's body. Once, twice. The scales held, but the blows made it loosen just enough for him to pull one leg free. He rolled toward the dead ironwood and pressed his shoulder against the trunk. 1. The viper came through the leaves. 2. Its fangs struck Haru's raised shield. The collision nearly broke his contact, but Haru hooked his numbing right arm around the trunk and held on. 3. Pressure released through the dead roots. The rotten seam split with a sound like a snapped bone. The tree leaned. Haru had planned to weaken it for exactly that reason. He stepped away from the trunk and showed the viper his unguarded left side. The creature attacked the opening. Haru waited until its head passed him, then slammed his shield into the side of its neck. The viper twisted beneath the dead tree. Haru cut the final strip of wood holding the trunk upright. The ironwood fell. The viper tried to pull back, but the trunk caught the middle of its body and crushed it into the ash. Its head remained free. Its tail thrashed hard enough to throw gray dust above the surrounding bushes. Haru did not attack the skull. He could see the swollen venom sac behind the creature's jaw. As long as it remained intact, another bite could refresh the poison and extend the numbness. He pinned the head with his shield and cut behind the sac with his left hand. The first strike missed. The second opened the scales. The third destroyed the sac. Dark venom spilled into the leaves instead of Haru's body. The viper bit the rim of his shield again and again. Each impact cost 1 health point. With pressure empty, Haru had time. He drove the blade through the wound beneath its jaw. The ash viper stopped moving. Haru remained beside the fallen tree until the venom notice disappeared. His right hand was almost completely numb, but the effect was no longer spreading. Second breath returned to full strength and began repairing the health he had lost one small event at a time. That fight had taught him more than the granite boar. Impact Ledger did not make him immune to poison. It did not stop paralysis. It did not free him from restraints. It only controlled direct damage, and any enemy that attacks through several effects could still create a deadly sequence. When Haru collected the Viper's core, he found something hard beneath it. At first, he thought it was another rune. It was a narrow black key marked with a silver doorway. A system notice identified it in simple terms. One use wild dungeon key acquired. Activate it to reveal a hidden dungeon. Haru stared at the key. Wild dungeons appeared once, rewarded the first person who cleared them, and then vanished. Even experienced hunters could search for months without finding a key. He stored it carefully inside his coat, rather than using it immediately. A hidden dungeon was not something to enter with one numb hand, torn clothing, and sunset approaching. His experience bar was also close enough to level 3 that leaving now would waste the remaining daylight. Haru returned toward the marked boundary, choosing isolated level 3 monsters along the way. He fought one ash crawler beside a stone ridge and another moss ram near a buried foundation. Each battle followed the rules he now understood. Find stable ground. Control the attack rhythm. Release pressure before the meter became dangerous. The last monster he needed was feeding beside a dry stream. Haru raised his sword, then stopped. An ironhide stag stepped into view behind it. The stag was level 5. Overlapping plates covered its entire body, and 3 smaller monsters moved around its legs. Haru could survive its charge, but damaging it with his current blade might take an hour. The smaller creatures could interrupt every attempt to release pressure. Earlier that morning, Haru might have attacked just to prove that nothing could hurt him. Now he understood that surviving a fight and choosing a good fight were not the same thing. He backed away without drawing the stag's attention. 10 minutes later, he found a lone stone-jaw fox digging beneath an old road marker. The fox was level 3 and fast, but it attacked in single leaps. Haru let it strike his shield, turned its momentum into the marker, and finished it after a short fight. A level-up chime sounded before the body reached the ground. Haru reached level 3. His health expanded again. Strength, speed, recovery, and mental strength all improved. More importantly, that mental growth increased his pressure capacity enough that the Ash Viper's full poison cycle would no longer bring him quite as close to failure. Haru looked at what remained of his uniform. The right sleeve was gone. 3 cuts crossed the front of his shirt. Dust had turned the lower half gray, and the shield strap had rubbed a dark line across his shoulder. Anyone who saw him would assume he had barely survived. His health was almost full. He started back toward Stone Bay with the wild dungeon key hidden inside his coat, and less than an hour remaining before the first daily ranking appeared. Behind him, the ash wild settled into evening. Ahead, the city's ranking towers were already beginning to glow. At the city gate, Nami and Noah spotted him coming up the road. Noah stared for several seconds before speaking. "Did you fight the forest, or did you wear it?" Haru looked down at himself. Forest won on points. Noah tried not to laugh. She failed. Nami did not laugh, but the corner of her mouth moved. She was wearing pale gold armor that looked completely untouched, and her long spear was strapped across her back. A thin circle of sunlight moved around its blade even though the sun was nearly gone. Noah stood beside her in a blue travel coat. A narrow silver thread ran from the ring on Noah's finger to the back of Nami's hand. That was the mark of her contract link class. Noah could bond herself to one fighter and strengthen everything that person did. She could not support a whole group, but the one person she chose became much harder to stop. That explained why both of them looked tired, but neither looked injured. Nami studied the dark veins fading beneath Haru's skin. Poison? It was worse 20 minutes ago. You went into the ash wild. It was not a question. Haru nodded. Noah's smile disappeared. At level 1? I was level 2 by then. That answer did not help. Nami stepped closer and lifted one hand. Warm light spread from her fingers, forming a loose coat of golden fire around Haru. It did not burn. It settled across his ruined clothes like a second uniform, hiding the torn fabric beneath a mantle of light. His body also felt lighter. The last numbness in his hand faded, and the heavy ache in his shoulders eased. Sun mantle, Nami explained. It raises the basic attributes of anyone I recognize as an ally. It will last until we reach the city. Noah folded her arms. She means she was tired of looking at your knees. Haru glanced down. The golden coat covered those too. Then please thank the sun for its mercy. They continued toward Stone Bay together. Other new hunters were returning along the same road in groups of 3 or 4. Most leaned on one another. How everything that they were going. Several had bandages wrapped around their arms, and one teen carried a cracked shield between them like a stretcher. Every few steps, someone looked at Haru's glowing mantle and then at Nami. By the time they reached the first line of guild tents, the whispers had already started. Nami ignored them. What is your mental potential now? Still 19.7. Then tonight matters more than the ranking. Haru looked at her. Nami lowered her voice. Once you cross 20%, mental power changes. You gain a storage space, your perception becomes more precise, and if your control is stable enough, you may be offered a mental skill. Haru had heard rumors about mental skills, but never from someone who spoke as if she had studied the process personally. May be offered? Reaching 20% only opens the door. Most people still need years of training and rare materials before anything happens. The material also affects the skill. A fire-based resource may shape it toward heat. A perception resource may shape it toward detection. A poor choice can leave you with something narrow for the rest of your life. Noah tapped the side of her head. And mental resources are painfully rare. You cannot buy the good ones in a beginner shop. The trial rankings offer them, Nami said. That is why everyone at the top is pushing so hard during the first week. Levels matter, but the rewards behind the levels matter more. Haru thought of the one-use key inside his pocket. And he had gained it from the Ash Viper, and it was supposed to open a wild instance once he reached level 5. If Nami was right, that key might be more valuable than every monster core he had gathered all day. It also gave him a second reason to keep hunting above his level. Curs. The first was survival through impact ledger. The second was learning how to do something with all the force building inside it. Pan found them near the central ranking square. He pushed through the crowd with dried mud on his face and one boot tied together with cord. Then he saw Haru under the sun mantle and stopped so quickly that someone walked into his back. I leave you alone for one day and you come back dressed like the final boss of a church. Nami was protecting the public. Pan looked at the light covering Haru's ruined uniform. From what? Mostly my knees. Pan nodded as if that answered everything. Then he grabbed Haru by both shoulders. I reached level 2. Tabled this. The excitement in his voice made Haru smile. Pan had awakened as a B-rank Shadow Scout. It was a useful class, but not one known for killing speed. Reaching level 2 on the first day meant he had taken risks and chosen his targets well. How close did you get to the top 100? Haru asked. I have no idea. I stopped checking estimates because they were ruining my life. A deep bell sounded over the square. The conversations around them faded. Above the guild tents, a broad sheet of blue light unfolded across the evening sky. It began with a summary of the first day. More than 800 new hunters had entered Stone Bay's trial zone. A little over 100 had reached level 2. Only 2 had reached level 3. The crowd changed at once. Exhausted students stood straighter. Guild recruiters stepped out of their tents. Even the veteran hunters passing through the square slowed down to watch. The ranking began from the bottom of the top 100. Pan's name appeared at 98th. For a moment, he did not react. Then he pointed at the board with both hands. That is me. It looks like you, Haru agreed. No, that is actually me. I am on the board. Nami, tell him I am on the board. Nami gave the glowing name a serious look. You appear to be on the board. Pan made a sound that did not belong to any known language. The names continued climbing. Craig appeared in 11th place at level 2. He had missed the best reward tier by less than 4 minutes. Daniel appeared in 6th. That caused the first real murmur. An S-rank warbreaker was built for fast hunting, and Daniel had entered the zone with an organized group. Most students had expected him to place in the top 3. Daniel stood near the front of the square with Craig beside him. His expression did not change, but his jaw tightened. 4th and 5th went to 2 S-rank students from Stone Bay's other schools. 3rd went to an A-rank summoner Haru did not know. Then only 2 names remained. First place appeared in bright gold. Nami. Level 3. Double S-rank Sunlancer. Northline team. No one was surprised by the name, but the team beside it caused people to look around. Northline was supposed to have fallen apart that morning. The second name appeared a moment later. Haru. Level 3. C-rank Anchor Guard. Northline team. The square went quiet. Not merely calmer. Quiet. Haru could hear a loose sign tapping against a guild tent across the street. Then everyone started speaking at once. Some asked if the board had made a mistake. Others immediately decided Nami must have carried him. That explanation moved through the crowd because it was comfortable. A double S-rank fighter dragging a weak tank to level 3 made more sense than a C-rank Anchor Guard doing it alone. The problem was that Noah had spent the entire day linked to Nami. She looked at Haru again, and this time there was no amusement in her expression. You really went alone, she said. I told you I did. People say many things when their clothes are missing. Nami watched him with the same quiet attention she had shown at the ceremony. She did not ask how he had done it in front of the crowd. That was another reason Haru trusted her. Curiosity did not make her careless. hand finally stopped celebrating his own rank long enough to stare at Haru's name. You are second. That is what it says. You said you would be fine. You did not say you would become a citywide problem before dinner. The reward notices arrived a moment later. Haru ignored most of the equipment list. He chose a strong constitution coat that could survive more than one day in the forest, then a pair of boots with a short dash effect. The boots would double his speed for several seconds, but they needed time to recharge after each use. He used one upgrade option on the coat to give it a brief concealment effect. It would not hide sound or scent, but it could blur his outline long enough to break an enemy's visual focus. Both choices solved real problems. The coat gave him more health and more pressure capacity. The boots could help him escape swarms or reach stable ground before an overload. The rare resource choice mattered more. Among the available materials, one object carried a faint feeling of cool pressure against his forehead. A mind shard. It was smaller than his fingernail and looked like a cloudy piece of glass. Nothing about it seemed worthy of a top-ranking reward. But when Haru focused on it, the space behind his eyes tightened. He chose it immediately. Daniel saw the reward appear in Haru's hand from across the square. He also saw Nami standing beside him and the Northline name displayed under both of them. For the first time that day, Haru thought Daniel looked less angry than confused. Rank was supposed to make the world simple for him. The strongest class led. Everyone else followed. IW and Knight of God. Haru's name on that board had made the simple version of the world slightly harder to defend. Haru did not stay in the square to listen to strangers argue about him. He took Pan into the nearest trial guild, sold the cores he had collected, and used most of the money to improve his blade. The clerk sorted the cores twice. The first pile came from ordinary level 1 creatures. The second came from the stronger beasts beyond the safe route. When she reached the Ash Viper core, she looked at Haru, looked at the C rank listed beside his name, and quietly calculated the price again. Haru bought 2 strength runes and left before she could ask questions. Stone Bay's streets were still crowded when he reached home. Greens, outside restaurants played highlights from trial cities around the country. Most showed elite awakenings, first-day records, and guild representatives making predictions about people who had been fighters for less than 12 hours. One short report caught Haru's attention. A disaster-class creature had changed its migration route over the Western Sea. Weather towers had recorded a moving pressure system large enough to cover 3 cities, but the creature inside it had not yet been identified. Coastal authorities were monitoring the clouds. The report lasted less than a minute before another presenter began discussing a record-breaking awakening in the capital. Haru turned the screen off. Creatures in the upper atmosphere had nothing to do with him. At level 3, he still needed several hits to kill a large rabbit. He placed the tiny mind shard on the floor, sat in front of it, and began to meditate. Mental training was not dramatic. There was no glowing storm, no shaking furniture, and no sudden voice teaching him the secrets of the universe. Haru slowed his breathing, held one thought at a time, and moved his attention through the same pattern he had practiced for years. The difference was that 19.7% no longer felt like a ceiling. Every completed cycle brought him closer to something he could sense but not quite touch. Near midnight, the pressure behind his eyes sharpened. Near dawn, it became a thin point of warmth. Then it opened. Haru's awareness expanded through the room. He could hear dust shifting along the window frame. He could feel the weak vibration from a water pipe inside the wall. When he looked at his blade, he did not merely see the steel. He sensed its weight, balance, and exact distance from his hand. A calm notice passed through his mind. Mental potential has reached 20%. Mental storage is now available. Haru touched the blade. It vanished. For one alarming second, he thought he had destroyed his only weapon. Then he became aware of a small, dark space somewhere behind his thoughts. The blade floated inside it beside nothing at all. He called it back. The weapon returned to his hand. Haru tested the new space with his shield, his spare shirt, the wild instance key, and finally a cup from the kitchen. Everything entered and returned exactly as he imagined it. The storage space was not large. It was closer to a closet than a room. Still, it meant he no longer needed to carry cores, medicine, food, and equipment in a pack that monsters could tear open. The second change became clear when Haru focused on his own body. He could sense impact ledger. Before, pressure had only been a number. Now he could feel the path it followed. Prevented force entered through the point of impact, spread through an invisible network around his muscles and bones, then collected behind his chest like water trapped above a dam. When he grounded himself, that network reversed and emptied through the surface beneath him. Understanding the route did not remove the 3-second restriction, but it gave him a better sense of how close he was to losing control. One more notice followed. A mental skill can now be awakened. Would you like to begin? Haru looked at the mind shard. He picked it up and drew the energy inside. The cloudy piece of crystal crumbled between his fingers. Coolness entered his forehead and formed a single pale drop inside a space that had not existed a moment before. It was an awakening reservoir, and the resource from his second-place reward had barely covered the bottom. If Haru awakened a skill now, that tiny amount of mental energy would decide what it became. The decision would be permanent. He might gain a weak detection trick, a few seconds of better focus, or something completely useless beside Impact Ledger. Nami had warned him that the material shaped the result. Haru chose no. The offer faded, but the reservoir remained. He would fill it first. That decision cost him most of the morning. By the time he finished testing his storage and adjusting to the new perception, the trial clock had already passed 11. Outside the western gate, hundreds of new hunters had been fighting since sunrise. Haru's late arrival caused exactly the reaction he expected. Some assumed Nami had refused to carry him again. Others believed second place had frightened him into avoiding the forest. A few decided he had spent the morning celebrating and would fall out of the top 10 by evening. Haru walked past all of them. High above the gate, inside an observation room built into Stone Bay's wall, Grant watched him enter the Ashwile. The provincial inspector wore a plain black coat without any school emblem. 3 principals stood around the table behind him, each arguing for a different team to receive the province's special selection positions. Only 2 positions were available. Every school wanted Nami in one of them. Daniel's principal proposed a team made entirely of S-rank or higher fighters. Another principal agreed and called Northline an emotional mistake that would disappear once Nami understood the competition. Haru's principal did not answer immediately. Grant ignored most of the argument. A mechanical lens beside the window followed Haru for several seconds, then displayed a faint mental reading. 20%, Grant said. The room became quieter. One principal leaned toward the lens. Already? Grant watched Haru cross the marked trail alone. Apparently. That was all he said. But the C-rank student who had placed second without a registered party was no longer merely an odd result on a board. Haru knew none of that. He had already found the creature trying to ambush him. The glass mantis clung to a pale tree 15 meters ahead. Its body matched the bark so perfectly that ordinary sight reduced it to a ripple in the air. Yesterday, Haru would have walked beneath it and let the first blade find his neck. Today, he could sense the tension building in its rear legs. He stored his shield and blade, approached with empty hands, and waited. The mantis dropped. Haru called the blade directly for mental storage as he stepped aside. Steel appeared halfway through the motion. The point drove into one of the monster's clear eyes. The level 5 creature screamed and slashed his shoulder. 1 damage. Pressure rose, but Haru was already turning. He struck the same eye again, then a third time. The mantis tried to hide among the trees, but damaged vision ruined its camouflage. Every time it shifted its weight, Haru's expanded perception warned him which direction it would move. He could not match its speed. He did not need to. He let it attack, accepted 1 controlled hit, and used the opening to damage the eye until the blade reached the brain behind it. The mantis collapsed. One creature had given him more experience than several hours of level 1 hunting. That was the advantage Haru intended to keep. Deeper in the Ashwild, he found 4 iron apes searching through the ruins of an old stone bridge. They were level 6, fast, and strong enough to tear a beginner apart. Fighting all 4 at once would repeat the needlebat mistake on a much larger scale. So Haru did not challenge the group. He threw a piece of the mantis shell into a narrow drainage channel. 1 ape followed the sound. Haru met it, where the broken walls prevented the others from surrounding him. The ape's first fist struck his shield and added 7% pressure. Haru cut its thigh, stepped back, and used the wall behind him to vent while the injured creature recovered its footing. The other apes heard the fight and came running. Haru collapsed a loose section of bridge between them, leaving himself with only 1 opponent. By the time the others climbed around the debris, the first ape was dead. He repeated the process. Separate, receive 1 attack, target the legs, vent against stone, and move before the group reformed. It was not quick. It was controlled. When the 4th ape fell, the level up notice arrived. Level 4 reached. Haru's health expanded, his constitution rose, and the invisible reservoir that held pressure became wider with it. He took out the wild instance key. A dim arrow appeared above its surface, pointing deeper into the Ashwild. Haru followed it for nearly an hour until he reached an abandoned pump station sinking into the side of a hill. The key glowed as he approached. Then a notice stopped him. Entry requirement, level 5. Haru looked at the darkening sky. He had arrived late. The second ranking would be measured that evening, and the best source of mental materials he had found was sealed behind 1 more level. Ordinary hunting would not get him there in time, so Haru did something that would have sounded incredibly stupid if he explained it aloud. He walked into an open field, struck his blade against his shield, and began making as much noise as possible. He wanted 1 powerful monster. The Ashwild sent him 7. Shapes appeared between the trees around the field. Long bodies, clear teeth, legs that bent like glass springs. Glass jackals. Every one of them was level 7. The alpha lowered its head, and the pack spread out without a sound. Haru had enough time to understand two things. First, they were not going to attack one at a time. Second, the open field he had chosen contained only 3 stone outcrops strong enough to ground a vent. The first jackal struck his back before he finished counting them. 1 damage, 1 damage. 2 more claws followed from opposite sides. Pressure jumped from 12% to 31. Haru turned toward the closest animal, but it had already retreated. A fourth rushed in as soon as he moved. The pack was rotating attackers. Every jackal spent only a moment within reach, then another took its place. His improved perception showed him the pattern. His level 4 body was not fast enough to stop it. Within 20 seconds, pressure passed 60%. Haru stopped trying to chase them. He moved toward the nearest outcrop and placed one hand against it. 1 second. A jackal bit his leg. 2 seconds. The alpha hit his shield hard enough to lift his boots from the ground. The vent broke. Oh! Pressure reached 74%. Haru landed, activated the dash in his boots, and vanished from the center of the pack. He crossed the field in a blur and reached the second outcrop before the jackals could reform around him. This time, he pressed his back to the stone and activated the stealth effect in his new coat. His outline faded into the rock. The jackals slowed. They could still smell him. They could hear him, but the loss of a visible target broke the perfect order of their rotation. 2 moved left. 3 moved right. The alpha remained still, trying to find him. Haru completed the 3 seconds. Pressure poured into the stone. Cracks spread behind his shoulders as the meter dropped below 10%. Then he attacked. He used stealth not to escape, but to reach the alpha before the pack recovered. His blade cut across one rear leg. The alpha spun and caught him in the chest, adding another burst of pressure, but Haru held close this time. He drove the shield into its jaw and kept the animal from retreating. The remaining jackals rushed him. Balls, separate claws, separate bites, separate points of damage. Haru ignored them and focused on the alpha. The pack's coordination came from that animal. If it died, the others would still be dangerous, but they would stop behaving like one creature with 7 bodies. His blade struck the injured leg again. The alpha fell to one side. Haru cut beneath its jaw. Pressure passed 80%. Second breath weakened, and the small wounds across his body stopped closing. The alpha kicked free and bounded toward the third outcrop. Haru followed with another dash, reached the stone first, and placed one hand against it. The jackals hit before he could count 1 second. The alpha's shoulders smashed him into the outcrop. The stone broke. Haru rolled across the grass as the pressure notice rose to 98%. One more heavy attack could fill the meter. If impact ledger switched off inside the pack, every claw after that would deal its true damage. There was no stable ground close enough, so Haru stopped looking for one. He threw his shield into the alpha's face. The animal recoiled. Haru stepped inside its guard, held the blade in both hands, and drove it through the wound beneath its jaw. The alpha collapsed on top of him. Its body was large, heavy, and no longer moving. It also formed a temporary wall between Haru and the rest of the pack. Haru reached beneath it and pressed his palm into the soil. 1 second. The remaining jackals circled without their leader. 2 seconds. One lunged too early and collided with another. 3 seconds. Pressure emptied directly into the ground. The force cracked the soil beneath the alpha and shattered its glass fur in a line from shoulder to tail. Haru stood. Without the alpha, the pack lost its rotation. 2 attacked together and blocked each other. 1 tried to flee. Haru isolated them using the broken outcrops and finished them one at a time. When the last jackal fell, Haru remained still for several breaths, listening to his own heartbeat. Then the level up notice came. Level 5 reached. He had earned access to the wild instance. He had also learned that he did not need to be standing to vent. He only needed contact with the ground and 3 seconds in which the enemy could not move him. That knowledge had saved him once. The pump station ahead was about to test whether it could save him underwater. Haru returned to the abandoned station and fitted the key into a circular mark on its main door. The metal split down the center. Behind it, a stairway descended beneath the hill. Rusted pipes covered the walls, and black water dripped from every joint. Haru stepped inside. The door closed above him before he reached the bottom. The name entered his mind. Drowned Bell Works. Then came the requirements. Namus. Restart 3 pumps. Collect 6 resonance catalysts. Defeat 3 wardens. Time remaining 6 hours. Somewhere below, an enormous valve opened. Water rushed through the structure. Haru's first thought was that 6 hours sounded generous. His second came when cold water poured across the stairs and reached his ankles in less than 10 seconds. This place was not giving him 6 hours to explore. It was giving him 6 hours before the entire ruin became a grave. Haru drew his blade from mental storage and extended his new perception through the walls. The bellworks had 3 main chambers connected by narrow service tunnels. Each contained a pump. Faint points of energy marked the resonance catalysts, while larger moving shapes marked the wardens. The closest pump was below him. He followed a rail down into the first chamber. Water had already covered the floor, leaving only a circular platform around a dead machine. 2 blue crystals grew from the valve housing. Haru collected them, and the count rose to 2 out of 6. A heap of rust beside the pump unfolded. It was a crab nearly twice Haru's height. Its shell had fused with old plates from the bellworks, and each claw was large enough to wrap around his body. The first warden, the rust crab, moved slowly, but the narrow platform gave Haru nowhere to circle. Its claw came down like a press. 1 damage. Pressure rose by 15%. Haru cut the joint beneath the claw. The blade barely entered. The crab lifted the limb, reset its weight, then struck again in the exact same rhythm. Each reset took slightly more than 3 seconds. That pause was enough. After every crushing attack, Haru braced 1 foot against the fixed pump housing and held contact for the full 3 seconds. The vent completed before the next claw fell. Strike, cut the joint, vent, move. The crab had more armor than the granite boar, but it was predictable. Haru opened 1 joint, severed the limb, and climbed onto the shell. The second claw could not reach its own back. He drove the blade through a rusted seam until the warden stopped moving. The crab's core fit into the pump. The machine shuddered awake. Water around the platform began draining through vents in the floor. 1 pump active. Haru collected a 3rd catalyst from beneath the shell and moved on. The second chamber was already waist deep. A glass walkway crossed above submerged machinery, but the entire frame trembled with electrical energy. Haru sensed the next warden before it appeared. A transparent eel moved through the water below him. The creature was longer than a city bus, and bright currents flashed inside its body. The first arc struck Haru through the railing. 1 damage. Then the current jumped through the wet floor and struck again. Another damage event. Pressure climbed twice from a single attack. Guru all S placed a hand on the walkway to vent. The stored force began moving downward, met the electricity inside the metal, and rebounded through his arm. His muscles locked before the first second ended. He pulled away. The eel attacked again. Direct force could not seriously injure him, but repeated current made his fingers close without permission. If his lungs locked while the chamber flooded, 1-point protection would not matter. Haru looked past the eel to the dead pump. 3 thick cables ran from its housing into the wall. 1 had broken loose and hung above the water. Haru stored his blade, activated the dash boots, and crossed the walkway as another arc chased him. He grabbed the dry cable and connected it to the pump's outer frame. The next electrical strike hit Haru, entered the wet railing, and followed the new route into the machine. The pump began turning. The eel had been powering the chamber without realizing it. Haru let it attack again. This time, the machinery woke fully, pulling water toward the lower intake. The eel fought the current, but its long body slid across the chamber. Haru drew his blade and held it above the intake grate. The creature reached him mouth first. He drove the point through its clear skull as the pump pinned it in place. Second warden defeated. Second pump active. As the water lowered, Haru found 2 more catalysts trapped beneath the glass walkway. The count rose to 5. Something blue was growing around the pump cable. It looked like ordinary moss until Haru touched it. A sharp, cool current passed through his fingers and struck the awakening reservoir inside his mind. Blue static moss. A mental resource. The tiny mind shard from the ranking had created 1 pale drop. This material held dozens. Guru stored it instead of absorbing it. He still did not know what waited deeper inside the bellworks, and consuming every resource immediately was exactly how people ended up with skills they regretted. He found an ember-colored seed near the eel's core and stored that too. Fire might be useful later. It did not need to decide his mental future today. The route to the last chamber ran through a tunnel filled to the ceiling. Haru took 1 breath and entered. Impact ledger could limit bites and electrical shocks. It could not create air. He pulled himself along fixed pipes while his mental perception searched for the next opening. Halfway through, something small wrapped around his ankle. He cut it away without looking and kept moving. Pressure did not matter here. Every second without oxygen did. Haru reached the far hatch, forced it open, and surfaced in a narrow service room. The 6th catalyst rested in a cracked control box. The moment he took it, a bell rang. The sound did not travel through his ears. It appeared inside his head. 1 mental damage. Haru blinked. He was standing beside an open control box with 1 hand raised. For several seconds he could not remember why. Then the bellworks returned in pieces. The pumps. The key. The mental resource. The final chamber. He turned toward the only remaining door. The bell rang again. 1 mental damage. Damage! Haru took 3 steps, stopped, and looked behind him. Had he just come through that door, or was he trying to reach it? Water began spilling into the room through the tunnel hatch. The third pump was still inactive. Haru repeated the objective aloud. Restart the last pump, defeat the final warden, leave. He wrote the same words into the dust on his shield. The bell rang a third time. When Haru looked down, he could not remember writing them. Back at Stone Bay's western gate, nobody knew Haru was fighting to remember his own objective. They were too busy arguing about his rank. Nami and Noah had returned before sunset. Daniel and Craig were waiting beside the ranking square. Daniel made the same offer in a more careful way this time. Province had only 2 special selection positions. Other cities would bring complete S-rank teams. If Nami joined him and Craig, Northline would have 3 high-ranked fighters instead of a C-rank captain who refused to appear until noon. Nami listened until he finished. Class rank measures an awakening, she said. It does not measure judgment. Craig glanced at the empty road behind her. And what judgment has Haru shown? The ranking bell answered for her. The second day board opened above the square. Daniel had reached level 4 and remained 6th. Noah appeared in 3rd at level 4. Nami appeared in 2nd at level 5. Then Haru's name appeared above hers. 1st place. Level 5. C. Rank Anchor Guard. A Northline team. For the second night in a row, the square forgot how to make noise. Daniel recovered first. That is impossible. This time, the crowd agreed more quickly. 2nd place could be explained away as help from Nami. 1st place, when Nami had fought all day with Noah, could not. Daniel pointed toward the board. A veteran is weakening monsters for him. There is no other explanation. High in the wall, Daniel's accusation carried through the observation feed. Grant could have ignored one angry student, but if the accusation spread, every legal result Haru earned would remain buried beneath the rumor. Grant placed one hand on the trial control and made the decision himself. Open Haru's verified progression trace. Only then did Haru's name change color. Progression review in progress. People stepped back as if the words themselves were dangerous. Trial cheating meant a lifetime ban from government ratings. Daniel looked almost relieved. An official review was exactly what he had wanted. High in the wall, Grant read the private trace. He found no veteran, no illegal party, no experience transfers. What he found was stranger. Haru had killed a level 5 glass mantis alone, then 4 level 6 iron apes, then an entire level 7 jackal pack. Every experience gain matched a verified death inside the trial boundary. Grant authorized a public summary. The board changed again. Solo progression confirmed. All defeated targets verified. No outside assistance detected. A map appeared for only a few seconds. It showed Haru's route cutting through the Ashwild, far beyond the paths most level 5 teams were willing to enter. The mockery in the square changed into something sharper. Interest. One veteran guild officer enlarged the route and studied the spacing between Haru's kills. He pointed out that the times were too close for someone who kept returning to a healer. Whoever Haru was, he had remained in the field and moved deeper after every fight. That observation mattered more than another 100 surprised students. This was a man who had spent years reading hunt records, and even he could not make Haru's route fit the limits of a beginner tank. Noah looked from the map to Nami. You knew he was unusual. I knew he stayed calm when everyone else made decisions for him, Nami said. The rest is new. Daniel said nothing. Daniel said nothing Astix and Depressed, and the official trace had not merely rejected his accusation. It had placed his organized S-rank group beside the solo route of the C-rank captain he had tried to remove that morning. Hans stood near the back, reading faster than anyone else. He entered a wild instance. Nami looked at the final line. Current location sealed. Active wild instance. Grant read that line from the observation room as well. The trace proved Haru had earned every level. It did not explain how an anger guard survived the things he had killed, and now whatever answer existed was sealed underground with him. Haru stood in front of the final bellworks door, reading the words scratched across his shield. Restart the last pump. Defeat the final warden. Leave. Leave! He did not remember writing them, but he recognized his own hand. That was enough. He pushed through the door. The last chamber was shaped like the inside of an enormous clock. Walkways circled a deep central shaft, while water poured steadily from openings in the walls. The third pump sat on a platform at the bottom. Above it hung 7 bells. 6 were false. The 7th had no solid body at all. Haru's perception found a creature made from vibration moving between them. A level 8 bell wraith. 3 resonance anchors fixed it to the chamber, allowing it to ring one bell and make the sound appear to come from another. The wraith attacked before Haru could study more. All 7 bells rang. One mental damage. Haru's thoughts separated like cards thrown into the air. He knew there was an enemy. He knew he held the blade. He could not remember which hanging shape he had meant to strike. The wraith swept past him. The impact dealt one damage and pushed him over the edge of the walkway. Haru caught a chain with one hand. Below him, the water continued climbing. He pulled himself back up and grounded his palm against the wall. Pressure had reached 63%. The bell rang before 3 seconds passed. Haru forgot why his hand was against the stone and moved it. The vent stopped. That was the real threat. The bell wraith did not need to break impact ledger. It only needed to interrupt Haru until pressure became full, then let the flood finish the job. Haru closed his eyes. The false bells moved. Their sounds changed position. The wraith's tricks altered what he heard and what he remembered. But one thing remained consistent. Every time the wraith crossed the chamber, the same chain trembled half a second later. Sound could lie. Physical vibration still had to travel through something. Haru wrapped the chain around his wrist so he could not forget which one mattered. A reward notice entered his mind in the middle of the next attack. First place reward available. Normally, Haru would have waited. Tonight, waiting meant drowning. He skipped the long equipment list and searched the weapon options for raw attack power. One enhancement answered immediately. Red line. While pressure remained above 80%, it would raise his strength by half. In exchange, second breath would stop completely until red line ended. For most defenders, losing recovery while already under heavy pressure would be a terrible bargain. For Haru, it was a way to turn the danger he already faced into the damage he needed. He applied red lime to his blade. A thin red line appeared along the edge. The rest of the first place reward remained unclaimed. There were armor choices, another rare material, and more equipment options waiting behind the notice, but Haru dismissed them. A person who stopped in the middle of a drowning dungeon to compare boots deserved whatever happened next. The wraith rang the bells again. Haru let the mental strike land. He forgot the plan, but the chain was still wrapped around his wrist. He followed it. He followed it. The next vibration led to the first anchor beneath the walkway. Haru drove his blade through the metal pin. The wraith screamed through all 6 false bells, rushed him, and raised pressure above 80%. The red line on Haru's weapon flared. Second breath stopped. The small wounds on his arms remained open. His next strike split the anchor completely. One false bell fell silent. Haru found the second by watching ripples move across the rising water. The wraith struck him repeatedly as he crossed the chamber. Each sound wave caused only a point of damage, but confusion stacked behind his eyes, and pressure climbed toward 90%. He destroyed the second anchor. The false bells flickered. The third anchor was attached to the pump itself. Haru jumped to the lower platform. The wraith followed, striking him hard enough to crack the housing beneath his feet. Pressure reached 96%. He planted one hand on the pump and tried to vent. The bell rang. For one empty second, Haru did not know his own name. Then, he saw the shield hanging from his arm. Restart the last pump. Defeat the final warden. Leave. He kept his palm down. 1 second. 1 second. The wraith attacked again. Pressure reached 98. 2 seconds. The sound inside Haru's mind became so loud that the chamber disappeared. 3 seconds. Haru's new mental perception showed him that the corroded pump could not survive a full release. He narrowed the outgoing flow and released only enough force to restart the mechanism. Pressure fell to 86%. Red line remained active. The machine roared awake. Water dropped through the central shaft. The sudden current pulled every hanging chain tight, forcing the false bells into fixed positions. The real wraith could no longer move between them without shaking the chain tied to Haru's wrist. It rushed him one final time. Garichu turned toward the vibration, not the sound. The red line burned across his blade. He cut through the third anchor and the wraith behind it in the same strike. The false bells shattered. Operatives ended so suddenly that Haru nearly fell. For several seconds, he stood beside the active pump and remembered the last 2 days in reverse pieces. The ceremony. Hand behind him. The golem. The forest. Nami's warning. The reason he had entered this place. Then the completion notice arrived. 3 pumps restarted. 6 catalysts collected. The Re-Wardens defeated. Perfect clear. The 6 collected catalysts flowed together and condensed into one refined resonance catalyst. Unlike the separate quest pieces, the finished catalyst could be used again. The experience pushed Haru to level 6. His dungeon score increased by 20 points, enough to place him ahead of beginners who would spend the next week clearing ordinary group instances. An equipment crystal entered his storage beside an epic ring formed from dark blue metal. The ring carried a large mental strength increase and room for many more runes. Haru equipped the ring immediately. The pressure behind his eyes eased as his mental strength rose. The final reward was a dense cluster of blue static, several times stronger than the moss he had already found. Haru did not absorb all of it. He drew in only a thread, leaving most of the dense cluster safely stored beside the blue static moss. Cool energy filled part of the awakening reservoir and sharpened the world around him. When he tested his blade against a fallen bell, pale blue light passed along the edge. The strike left a cut deeper than his strength should have allowed, as if part of the metal's armor had simply been ignored. It was not a completed skill. It was a hint of what the right mental resource could become. The bellworks began dissolving around him. Rusted walls turned into mist. The pumps faded while still running, and the floor beneath Haru became the muddy foundation of the abandoned station. Light had fallen over the ash wild. Haru stepped outside and immediately knew something was wrong. There were no insects, no distant monster cries, no leaves moving in the wind. Every living thing in the forest had become silent. Then the remaining clouds began to rotate. They formed a vast circle above the western hills, flashing blue from within. Something larger than any creature Haru had ever seen was descending through their center, and the same cold energy carried by the bellworks' blue static resource was falling from the sky around it. Lightning climbed out of the clouds instead of falling from them. Each bolt wrapped around a vast silver body, revealing fins wider than buildings and a tail that disappeared into the storm. His sharpened perception found the creature a moment before his inspection skill returned an answer. Her L. Level 48. Haru slowly put his blade back into mental storage. A level 8 Bell Wraith had almost made him forget his own name. Picking a fight with something 40 levels above that would not be brave. It would be a very creative way to disappear. The storm whale was not hunting though. It opened its enormous mouth and drew in the storm itself. Lightning, cloud vapor, and a pale mist that Haru could feel more than see all flowed toward it. The mist had the same cold pressure as the blue static resource from the bellworks, only far denser. The whale swallowed once. Blue light traveled beneath its skin. A second current, clear as moonlit water, curled around its fins. Then both streams descended from its body toward the ruined observatory below. That was when several figures arrived from Stone Bay. Grant came first, crossing the sky on a narrow platform of dark metal. 3 senior defenders followed him, including the principals of Stone Bay's largest schools. None of them looked pleased to find a disaster-class creature hanging over the city during trial month. Grant stopped level with the whale's eye. "This coast is under Alliance protection," he said. "Move north and finish your feeding beyond the settled region." The whale answered with a sound too deep to be called a roar. Haru felt the vibration to his bones. The clouds split open. A pressure wave tore across the observatory, ripped 2 old weather towers from their foundations, and sent a wall of broken stone toward Stone Bay. The 3 school leaders moved at once. One raised a broad earth wall. Another formed a net of light across the city-facing side of the battlefield. The third cut the remaining debris out of the air. Grant did not move backward. Dark metal unfolded from beneath his coat and became a flock of thin-winged birds. They shot into the clouds, linked together, and wrapped the storm whale in a cage of black lines. Lightning struck the cage. The whole night flashed white. That qualified as Haru signed to leave. He turned toward Stone Bay, took 3 steps, and stopped. The blue resource inside his mental space had strengthened the unfinished skill waiting behind his 20% mental threshold. It had even given his attacks a faint armor-breaking effect. But his awakening reservoir was still nowhere near full. The storm whale drew in another breath, and Haru's perception followed the energy moving through it. 2 condensed streams were running down behind the observatory. One carried the same blue force as the bellworks resource. The other felt cool, quiet, and strangely gentle. Both disappeared into the ground at the same hidden point. Haru focused harder. Behind the broken towers, he found the outline of a barrier. It did not simply block perception. It bent every probing thought to one side, making the protected area feel like empty land. Whatever waited behind it had been hidden by the whale itself. Grant's metal cage tightened. The whale rolled through the clouds and threw a field of lightning at him. The school leaders had to fall farther toward Stone Bay to keep the storm from reaching the outer camps. The safe decision was obvious. Haru had already won the second-day ranking, cleared a wild instance, and reached level 6. They could return home, absorb what he had, and awaken a decent mental skill. But decent was permanent. Once he accepted the skill, he could never refill the reservoir and try again. Haru looked at the hidden streams, then at Grant drawing the storm whale higher into the clouds. "This is a terrible idea," he said quietly. Then he activated the stealth effect on his coat and ran behind the battlefield. The broken observatory sat in a bowl of black rock. Every few seconds, thunder rolled across it hard enough to shake loose pieces from the walls. Haru kept his mental perception close to his own body. Probing Grant or the whale directly would be like knocking on a door and asking them to notice him. He reached the distorted barrier without being struck by anything, which was already a better result than he had expected. Unfortunately, someone else was there first. An older man in a gray travel coat stood with one hand held over the invisible wall. Silver instruments floated around his wrist like the points of a compass. His hair was nearly white, but his back was straight, and the energy around him made the surrounding dust move away in neat circles. The man noticed Haru without turning. "Stop there." Haru stopped. The man's attention swept over him. It paused on the C-rank anchor guard class, then on his level. "Level 6, he said. "Either trial month has become much more ambitious, or you are very lost." "I know where I am." "That is worse. Gee." The man finally looked at him. "A storm whale is fighting a provincial inspector less than a kilometer away. Go back to the city." Haru took 2 steps away from the barrier, but he did not leave. The old man had not reached this place by accident. More importantly, Haru wanted to see what he did next. The silver points around the man's wrist began turning. The barrier twisted with them. What had looked like a smooth wall became hundreds of overlapping currents, all flowing in different directions. The man selected one current and reversed it, then another. He worked without sound. He worked without sound. Each reverse path caused part of the barrier to fade until a narrow opening appeared in its center. Haru understood the problem immediately. He could survive an attacking barrier. This one was entirely defensive. Impact Ledger could reduce damage, but it could not punch a doorway through something that refused to hit him. The stranger had exactly the skill Haru lacked. Beyond the barrier was a circular hollow where the observatory's foundation had collapsed. A reservoir floated in its center, held above the ground by storm energy. Blue liquid moved along one side. Clear, shining water flowed along the other. The moment the opening became large enough for a person, a vast shadow formed over the pool. It looked like a smaller storm whale made from cloud and lightning. The old man lowered his hand. A storm echo," he murmured. The echo turned toward him. Lightning gathered along its fins. The man stepped back before the attack formed. The shadow settled over the reservoir again. The stranger sent one of his silver compass points through the opening as a test. It traveled low, almost touching the floor, and tried to curve around the edge of the hollow. The echo did not chase it. The guardian bent the hollow instead. Space folded. The compass point that had moved left appeared directly in front of the whale shadow. Its tail struck once and smashed the silver instrument into the barrier hard enough to leave a glowing crack. The older man pulled the damaged point back. His fingers shook once when it returned to the ring. "The entire hollow is its attack range," Haru said, "and its range moves with whoever enters. There is no quiet path around it." Haru watched the floating compass point slow down. "You can destroy it." The stranger glanced at him. "You should be farther away by now. But you can destroy it." "Yes. And the real whale will feel it." The man's expression changed slightly. Haru had his answer. The older man could destroy the echo, but doing so would alert the real whale. He could evade 1 or 2 attacks, but he could not fill 2 containers while the hollow folded every quiet route back toward its guardian. Haru pointed toward the 2 halves of the pool. "Which one do you need?" "That is none of your concern. We can," says, "the clear one." The floating instrument snapped toward Haru. He raised both hands. "The blue current matches something I found inside the bellworks. I want that. You want the other resource. You open the road and hide what happens inside. I cross the guardian zone and bring both back." For several seconds, the stranger only stared at him. Then he laughed once, without humor. "You are a level 6 shield user." "Correct. Correct. That echo carries part of a level 48 creature's strength." "Also correct." "And your plan is to walk through it?" "Running would make grounding harder." That answer made the man study him properly for the first time. "What skill do you have?" "One that works better if you don't interrupt it?" The stranger looked toward the clear half of the reservoir. His hard expression softened for just a moment. "It is called dream water," he said. "My granddaughter survived her awakening, but the energy damaged the channels around her mind. She is awake, she can speak, she simply cannot use the class she fought to awaken. Dream water may repair the damage." Now Haru understood why a veteran had slipped behind a disaster class fight instead of standing beside Grant. "Then we want different things," Haru said. "That makes the agreement simple." The old man looked back toward the storm. The fight was moving farther overhead, but it would not stay there forever. "My name is Doran," he said. "I can keep the barrier blind for several minutes. If I have to attack the echo to save you, the whale will know immediately." Haru, I am agreeing because time is short, not because this is sensible." "That makes 2 of us." Doran moved his compass points into a wide ring. A faint curtain formed around the hollow, bending sound and light back toward the center. "The disturbance is hidden," he said, "until it becomes too large." Haru placed 1 foot through the barrier. The storm echo opened its eye. Its tail crossed the hollow faster than Haru could follow. The impact sounded like a building collapsing. Haru slid several meters but stayed on his feet. 1 point vanished from his health. A message followed. Pressure level 91%. Doran's concealment field trembled. The veteran stared at Haru, then at the place where the echo's tail had struck him. You took that hit. One of his compass points moved toward the opening on instinct. Don't, Haru said. Doran stopped it just before it crossed the barrier. Haru understood why the veteran had reacted. There had been no barrier flash, no defensive spell, and no last-second evasion. A level 6 student had simply been struck by the copied tail of a disaster-class creature and remained standing. To Doran, it looked less like defense and more like the attack had forgotten how to cause damage. But Haru could feel how close that impression was to becoming dangerously false. The first hit had filled most of his capacity. If Doran entered now and drew a second attack, the echo's pattern could change. If he broke it, the whale would turn. Their only chance was to let Impact Ledger keep doing the impossible, while Haru obeyed every limit around it. Haru looked toward the floating reservoir. Between him and the resource were 6 broken observatory pylons, a fractured floor, and a guardian that had nearly filled his pressure with one attack. I was hoping it would be closer to 80, he admitted. The storm echo spread both fins. Lightning filled the hollow. The first bolt hit Haru in the shoulder. 1 damage, then it split into 7 smaller arcs. That was much worse. Each arc counted separately. Haru's health began dropping 1 point at a time, and pressure climbed in sharp little jumps. He ran for the first observatory pylon while the lightning chased him across the fractured floor. The pylon was connected to the old foundation, which made it stable enough to vent through. Haru pressed his palm against it. 1 second. The echo launched another tail strike. Haru moved around the far side of the pylon. A tail hit the metal column instead of his body and bent it almost in half, but his hand remained in contact. 2 seconds. Lightning crawled through the metal and struck him in 4 places. His muscles locked. For 1 terrible moment, his fingers started to lift away. Haru forced them flat. 3 seconds. Stored force poured out of him and entered the pylon. The lower half of the column split open. Pressure fell, though not nearly as much as it did when he used solid ground. The narrow metal route could only carry part of the force before it began to melt. So that was the crossing. Move between attacks. Move between attacks. Reach a fixed point. Hold contact for 3 full seconds. Vent what the structure could take, then leave before the echo destroyed it. Haru dashed to the second pylon. The echo released a broad pressure wave. The hit removed only 1 health point, but it lifted Haru off the floor. He could not vent while airborne. Worse, the wave carried him away from the pylon and toward the edge of the hollow. He used the dash effect in his boots as soon as 1 foot touched a hanging slab. The sudden burst changed his direction and drove him shoulder first into the next column. Haru wrapped an arm around it and began counting. The echo's lightning hit once, then divided. 1 second. A second wave bent the column and nearly tore it from the foundation. 2 seconds. The storm echo opened its mouth. A compressed sphere of thunder formed inside. Doran saw it too. Move! Haru stayed. 3 seconds. The vent completed just before the spear struck. The pylon vanished inside a white explosion, and Haru flew out of it with smoking clothes and a much lower pressure level. Doran's concealment field shook so hard that several compass points slipped out of place. He dragged them back in the line without attacking. You were not exaggerating, he said. Haru landed, rolled, and got up. I try not to do that around level 48 monsters. The third and fourth pylons came closer together. He used one to shield himself from the tail, then crossed to the other before the lightning pattern began. His sharper perception could now see the order in which charge moved along the echo's fins. It gave him a fraction of a second of warning. That warning did not make the attack slower. It only told Haru which kind of problem was about to arrive. A bright line along the tail meant 1 enormous impact and a huge rise in pressure. Branching light across the fins meant dozens of separate lightning hits, each small enough to survive but dangerous together. When cloud gathered beneath the echo, the next pressure wave would lift him away from every surface he could use. Haru stopped trying to dodge everything. He accepted the single tail strike when avoiding it would push him into the lightning pattern. He used his dash only against the pressure wave because being airborne at the wrong moment was more dangerous than losing 1 health point. Every choice traded 1 limit against another. Above 80% pressure, second breath slowed almost to nothing. The tiny lightning wounds along his arms stopped closing. His health was not low yet, but the accumulating numbness made his grip less reliable with every pylon. That fraction was the only reason he reached the 5th pylon. The reservoir was less than 20 meters away. Pressure had climbed above 99%. Second breath was barely working. Haru's health was still high, but the number no longer mattered. If Impact Ledger switched off, 1 direct attack from the echo would erase the entire bar. Correcting the office, he placed his hand on the 5th pylon. 1 second. Lightning gathered overhead. 2 seconds. The first bolt missed him and struck the base of the column. The fixed connection cracked. Haru felt the vent stop before the third second arrived. Pressure level 99.7%. Protection failure is close. The pylon toppled into the hollow. There was no sixth grounding point. The last column had been torn free when the echo first formed. Between Haru and the reservoir, every remaining piece of floor floated on storm energy. The echo drew back its tail. Doran shifted one hand toward it. He could break the Guardian and save Haru, but the real whale would turn immediately. The Dreamwater would be lost. The entire battle might move toward the city. Man, Haru searched his mental space. His blade would not help. The equipment crystal would not help. The blue resources could not be used quickly enough. Then he found the refined resonance catalyst from the Bellworks. The catalysts had linked old pumps to the foundations beneath flooded rooms. They did not create stability. They found it. Haru pulled the metal spike into his hand, drove it through the floating slab, and sent his mental power into it. The catalyst rang. Far below, buried observatory supports answered. A blue line connected the slab to the deep foundation. For a few seconds, it stopped floating and became part of the mountain. Haru dropped one knee and pressed both hands to the stone. The echo's tail struck his back. 1 damage. Pressure level 99.9%. 1 second. Chain lightning rushed toward him, but the temporary grounding route caught it first. The bolts passed through the catalyst and vanished into the buried observatory supports without touching Haru. 2 seconds. Each diverted bolt widened a crack through the catalyst. The blue line beneath it flickered. Haru locked his arms and kept contact. 3 seconds. Pressure left his body in one violent wave. The catalyst shattered. The floating slab broke into powder. The release force traveled down the temporary route and burst from the buried supports in a ring of blue light. Doran's concealment curtains stretched outward, nearly transparent, but it held. Haru jumped from the collapsing slab and landed beside the reservoir. The storm echo turned to follow him. For the first time since entering the hollow, Haru was close enough to inspect what he had risked his life to reach. The blue liquid was called blue current. It carried mental energy, lightning, and the ability to direct force through resistance instead of around it. The clear half was dream water, exactly as Doran had said. It carried restoration and memory. Goats. Between them floated a dark object no larger than a marble. Haru's perception touched it and failed. Dorm seed. Information unavailable at current mental strength. He did not have time to wonder about it. Haru drew 2 empty containers from mental storage. Blue current flowed into one. Dream water filled the other. The storm seed began to sink as the level of both resources fell. Haru caught it and placed it in mental storage. By the time the containers were full, the reservoir was empty. The storm echo released a soundless cry. Every remaining fragment of the observatory began to rise. Haru ran back through the Guardian Zone. The route was shorter now, but there were no pylons left to protect him. Removing the resources had also changed the echo. It no longer guarded the center. It attacked everything between Haru and the exit. Lightning hit from behind and branched across his back. His legs locked for half a step. The echo followed with the airborne wave before the numbness faded. Haru saw the pattern forming and used his dash boots, not to escape the wave but to reach it sooner. He drove himself into the front edge while both feet were still on a piece of foundation. The impact threw him toward the exit instead of away from it. Pressure climbed again. There was no time for another full vent, so Haru aimed for a broken slab that was still fixed to the original foundation by one thick steel brace. He landed on it, kept one palm down for 3 seconds, and released only as much force as the anchored stone could carry. The brace tore free after the partial release, but the pressure drop kept his protection active. Doran moved his concealment field with Haru's fall. For a veteran capable of reversing space, it would have been easy to drag Haru the final distance. Doing so would mean reaching into the Guardian Zone, giving the echo a path back to him, and exposing the entire hollow. Instead, he trusted Haru to finish the job he had claimed he could do. The echo's tail came down one last time and buried Haru in broken stone near the barrier. 1 damage. Haru pushed himself out, crossed the opening, and held the clear container toward Doran. Dreamwater. Doran did not take it immediately. He looked at Haru's burned coat, the blood running from dozens of tiny wounds, and the empty hollow behind him. Then he looked at the sealed bottle. Haru could have stored both resources and refused to return. Doran could not have followed without dropping the concealment field. Instead, the boy had crossed the storm echo twice and still kept the agreement exactly as he had made it. Doran accepted the Dreamwater with both hands. "You are either the most reliable young man I have met," he said, "or the least sensible. Those can both be true." Above them, the real storm whale stopped moving. The thunder ended so suddenly that Haru heard the last pieces of the observatory settling around them. Then an enormous silver eye turned toward the emptied reservoir. The whale understood what had happened. Its storm echo dissolved. Every trace of cloud and lightning inside the hollow rushed upward, carrying with it the exact pattern of force that had passed through Haru's body. For one moment, that force brushed against him like a hand searching in the dark. Then the storm whale roared. The sound punched a hole through Doran's concealment field. Grant's metal birds scattered across the clouds. The whale ignored him, rolled its entire body toward the observatory, and pulled so much lightning into its mouth that the night became bright as noon. Doran closed his fingers. The floating compass points around his wrist got a narrow shape through the air. What appeared was not a gate. It was a road made from places that should not have touched. One step crossed the observatory yard, the next crossed a ridge, and the third ended somewhere beyond the Ashwild. Move, Doran said. Haru did not need to be asked twice. They entered the folded road just as the whale released its attack. Lightning erased what remained of the observatory. Blast should have followed them, but Doran turned one silver point and cut the road loose behind their heels. The path collapsed. Haru felt the heat vanish, then returned from a completely different direction as they stumbled onto a high ridge several kilometers away. The storm whale's fury still shook the sky behind them. Grant drove his metal flock into the lightning and forced the attack upward before it could spread toward Stone Bay. The three school leaders rebuilt their defenses along the city side. What had been a controlled confrontation became a violent storm in seconds, and Haru knew exactly whose decision had changed it. He did not regret taking the blue current. Ensei or Ensei, but watching a disaster-class creature turn the clouds inside out was a useful reminder that rewards did not stop having consequences just because they entered his mental space. Doran looked toward the battle. It felt you. It didn't see me. It does not need your face. The echo recorded the way your skill handled its force. The whale is searching for that pressure pattern now. Haru checked the blue current in his storage. Even sealed inside a container, it gave off a pulse in time with the storm. Doran noticed his expression. The resource is still joined to its maker. Absorb it or move it far beyond the coast. Until then, the connection remains. How long do I have? Before it finds you? I don't know. Before Grant drives it away or reinforcements arrive? Hopefully less time than that. Another wave rolled over the ridge. Doran opened a second folded road, but the silver instruments around his wrist moved more slowly now. Hiding the reservoir and carrying Haru out had cost him. They crossed in shorter jumps, moving from ridge to forest, then from forest to the old road outside Stone Bay. Along the way, Haru opened the blue current container inside his mental space. He did not try to absorb it all. The small blue static resource had required concentration, and this was many times denser. Instead, he drew out a thread with his mental power. The effect was immediate. Cold fire traveled from his mental space through his entire body. Blue light appeared along his arms. A red glow followed beneath it as his constitution tried to contain the sudden heat. His health lost 1 point. Then another. The resource was not attacking him from outside. This was internal strain, so Impact Ledger could not reduce it, and none of the pain became pressure. Haru's constitution and mental control had to contain it normally. If he drew in too much at once, the energy could burn through him without ever touching his hidden defense. Haru tightened his control and narrowed the thread. The glow stabilized. You are absorbing it while running? Doran asked. You said it was traceable. Most people would stop first. Most people probably weren't followed by a storm whale when you met them. Doran almost smiled. No, you are the first. By the time they reached the coastal road, the eastern horizon had begun to pale. The whale was still visible behind the hills, but it was no longer moving toward Stone Bay. Grant and the senior defenders had boxed it inside a wall of storm clouds. Farther north, new lights were approaching through the sky. Reinforcements were finally on the way. Doran stopped before the first trial camp came into view. He held the Dreamwater beneath his coat as carefully as if it were made of glass, even though the container was metal. The road out was not part of our agreement, Haru said. Neither was keeping my name out of an official report. Haru looked at him. Grant is going to ask who opened that barrier, Doran continued. For the moment, I did it alone. If the whale tracks you into the city, that answer will become difficult to maintain. I'll absorb the connection before that happens. Doran removed one of the small silver points from his compass ring and offered it to him. If you ever need to find a road that does not exist, put mental power into this. Haru accepted it. And if the Dreamwater works, then I will owe you a road. We already split the resources. That paid for the crossing. It did not pay for keeping your word when you had every chance not to. Doran took one last look at the blue-red glow coming from Haru's skin. Do not let anyone tell you that surviving an attack is the same as being safe. Then the Pathfinder stepped sideways and disappeared down a road Haru could not see. Haru continued toward Stone Bay alone. Trial participants were already leaving the camps for the third morning. A few of them noticed the glowing person on the road and reached for weapons. Then one young fighter recognized his face. That's Haru. The reaction that followed was very different from the day before. Nobody laughed at the C rank on his class rec. Some moved aside. Others called his name or asked whether he had really spent the night inside the wild instance. One shield user stared at him like he was seeing proof that his own class might have value after all. Guru did not know how to respond to sudden popularity, so he settled for a nod and kept walking. Pan came running out of the nearest camp. There you are. Do you have any idea how many people decided you were dead last night? At least one fewer than yesterday. Pan stopped close enough to feel the heat and immediately stepped back. Why are you glowing? Rare resource. That answer explains almost nothing. It explains more than touching it would. Pan wisely kept his hands to himself. Haru opened the Northline roster. On the first morning, he had refused Pan because he did not understand his own skill. A pressure release could crack the ground around him, and fighting beside someone would force Haru to defend more than his own health. A normal hunt still carried that danger, but dungeons worked differently. Once the captain qualified to enter, the whole registered team could enter with him. Inside, Pan would not need to stand beside Haru and trade blows. He could scout. Nami could control enemies that threatened him. Most importantly, Haru now understood enough about pressure to choose a venting route before combat began. I send you an invitation, Haru said. Pan's joking expression disappeared when the message opened in front of him. Northline Captain Haru invites Pan, B-rank Shadow Scout, to join the team. You're serious. You wanted a specialist position. Northline needs a scout. Pan accepted so quickly that the message had barely finished appearing. Just to be clear, he said, I was prepared to make you ask twice. You pressed yes before I finished speaking. I changed the plan. Two more figures approached from the city gate. Nami wore light traveling armor and carried her sun lance across one shoulder. Noah followed beside her, watching the glow around Haru with open suspicion. Nami stopped in front of him. Are you in danger? It was not the usual question. She did not ask whether he was injured because she had already noticed that he was walking normally. She wanted to know whether the unstable energy could become everyone else's problem. Not if I keep absorbing it slowly, Haru said, but I should not enter another instance until it settles. Nami nodded once. No argument. No claim that her rank gave her the right to hurry him. Then we wait. She gestured toward Noah. There are 2 spaces left. I want one of them used for her. Noah folded her arms. Before you ask, I still dislike unexplained abilities, secret overnight trips, and captains who return from the Ashwild glowing. That sounds reasonable, Haru said. But I trust verified trial records. The record says you fought alone, cleared the bellworks, and did not cheat. Nami trusts your decisions. For now, that is enough. Haru sent the invitation. Noah joined Northline as its 4th member. Nami then drew a dark glass key from a case at her belt. Light moved inside it like a tiny sunrise. Special instance, she said. I received it through my awakening reward. It allows 4 entrants, but it adjusts to the combined strength of the team. I was not going to open it with people chosen for me by the schools. That explained why Daniel wanted her on a rank pure roster so badly. The key was not merely a leveling opportunity. A strong clear would matter when Grant chose 2 provincial candidates. Haru looked at Pan, then Noah, then the quiet confidence on Nami's face. 2 days earlier, Northline had been a school-funded name that none of them had chosen together. Now each member had entered for a reason. Give me the morning, he said. If the blue current stabilizes, we enter before noon. We'll be waiting, Nami replied. The next stop was the guild. Haru claimed the remaining first-place rewards he had postponed during the Bell Wraith fight. He chose a second mind shard and a set of mental runes, then closed the reward list before it could become another shopping trip. He sold the ordinary Bellworks cores along with the Ember Seed he had decided not to use. He kept every mental resource. He also kept the equipment crystal since it would be far more useful on level 10 gear than anything he wore now. The reward runes filled several settings in his epic ring. Kari used most of the money from the sale to buy the remaining mental runes it could hold. The clerk recognized his name halfway through the transaction and nearly counted the same coin twice, but Haru spared both of them a conversation about the leaderboard. There was no need for a long tour through every weapon on the wall. His blade was good enough for level 6. His coat and boots still worked. Right now, the most valuable thing he could buy was control. The runes in the ring gave him that. Haru returned to his small home, closed the shutters, and sat on the floor. The room was quiet enough that he could hear the blue current pulsing inside his mental space. Mada half. He moved the sealed storm seed to the farthest corner first. His perception still returned only the same answer. Information unavailable at current mental strength. Whatever the seed was, absorbing it blindly would be foolish. The liquid blue current had already shown him what happened when he took in more energy than his channels could carry. A sealed object from a level 48 creature could wait. Haru started with the second mind shard. It dissolved into another pale drop inside his awakening reservoir. Next came the blue static moss and the remainder of the dense Bellworks cluster. He absorbed them slowly. Their energy deepened the thin armor-breaking line created by his first test thread, but the reservoir still had room left. Only then did Haru place both hands on his knees and draw out another thread of blue current. The mental runes raised his control. Haru used that added control to divide the wild current himself and guide it through several smaller channels. The heat returned, but not the uncontrolled damage. His mental strength rose. More importantly, his perception changed. At 20% mental potential, Haru had learned to sense the broad route pressure followed through his body. Now, he could distinguish the individual channels inside that route and choose which ones received the flow. Prevented force still collected in the same dark space around his center, but it no longer felt like one solid mass he could only empty through the nearest hand or foot. The blue static resource from the Bellworks had left a thin line through that system. Instead of following the safest route around resistance, that line traveled straight through it. Armor break. Blue current widened the line. Haru absorbed the resource in stages. He stopped whenever the heat began rising too fast, used his increased control to settle it, then continued. The awakening reservoir climbed past half, then 3/4. As it filled, a strand of blue current touched the hidden seal surrounding 10th step. Haru's sharper perception followed that strand, and the sealed awakening record opened. Awakening record review complete. Haru opened his eyes. The explanation followed in simple lines. Public class, anchor guard, C rank. Hidden talent activation used the remaining awakening energy. Public class rank is unchanged. For 3 years, everyone had assumed Haru's record mental potential would produce an elite class. When the array stalled, some people believed it had failed. Others suspected his real class was hidden. Neither was true. 10th step had consumed the extra awakening energy at the exact moment it became active. What remained had formed Anchor Guard, and Anchor Guard really was C rank. Haru considered that for a while. Strangely, he preferred it this way. His public class was not a disguise waiting to fall away. The high health growth and second breath belonged to a supposedly ordinary shield class. Impact Ledger was powerful because of the way it worked with that weak foundation, not because a secret title had made the ranking meaningless. He returned to the blue current. The final portion was the densest. Pale blue light moved over his skin. The room warmed until moisture disappeared from the window glass. Inside his mind, the empty reservoir became a deep blue sea. The armor-breaking line reached its center. A soft notification sounded from his phone. Grant had sent an official invitation. Haru, captain of Northline, was requested to attend the provincial special selection assessment after the opening trial period. The invitation did not accuse him of anything. It did, however, mention that Grant wanted a private explanation of his defensive performance. Another message appeared beneath it. Nami had written only 5 words. Team ready when you are. The last thread of blue current disappeared. Mental resource capacity has reached its current limit. Would you like to awaken your mental skill now? Haru checked the room, the sealed storm seed, and the pressure path he could now see clearly inside himself. He had delayed this choice after reaching 20%. He had hunted rare resources, entered a flooded dungeon, fought through a mind-erasing bell, and crossed the guardian of a disaster-class creature to avoid settling for an unfinished result. There was nothing left to wait for. Yes, blue sea inside his mental space collapsed into a single current. It rushed through the armor-breaking line and connected to the dark chamber where pressure gathered. For one breath, Haru felt every hit he had taken since awakening. The golem's fist, the granite boar's charge, needle bat bites, venom ticks, the bell wraith's mental strikes, the overwhelming tale of the storm echo. They had all entered him as force with nowhere to go. Now that force had a direction. Mental skill awakened. Countercurrent. The skill's rules entered Haru's mind more clearly than a long system description ever could. When pressure was at least half full, he could shape the stored force into one return strike. The current would travel through armor instead of wasting itself against the surface. More pressure meant more power. But it was not free. Haru had to aim it with mental control. If he missed, the stored force was gone. Using it paused second breath, leaving him without combat recovery for a short time. And once pressure had been released, he needed enemies to attack him before he could use it again. The shield had finally gained an attack, but only because someone else hit it first. By late morning, Haru stood inside a reinforced calibration room at the Stone Bay Guild. Nami, Pan, and Noah watched from behind the safety line. A guild engineer operated a machine built to test defensive equipment for veteran teams. The machine had 6 padded arms arranged around a steel platform and a protected calibration pillar at the far end of the room. The engineer checked Haru's level twice. You understand that this is not beginner equipment. That is why I booked the reinforced room. And you want repeated impacts until you tell me to stop? Start at the lowest setting. The first arm struck Haru's shield. 0 damage. The machine increased its force automatically. A second arm hit. Then a third. Once its output passed Haru's constitution, 1 point disappeared from his health with each impact. Pressure gathered inside him. This time, Haru could see every part of the process. He let the meter pass 50%, then raised one hand. Stop. The machine went still. Pan leaned toward Noah. If this test ends with another crater, I want it recorded that I stood behind the line. Noah moved half a step farther behind Nami. Haru faced the calibration pillar. Its outer shell was designed to spread force in every direction. Its center was protected by layered plates strong enough to survive direct attacks from level 20 fighters. Destroying the outside would prove raw strength. Haru did not want to destroy the room. He wanted to see whether countercurrent could reach the part armor was built to protect. Haru lifted his shield hand and focused on a point no wider than a coin. The current inside him changed direction. Second breath stopped. Stored pressure moved through his arm, crossed the open room as a narrow distortion, and touched the pillar. There was no explosion. The pillar did not fall. For half a second, Pan looked disappointed. Then a perfect circle of metal slid out of the back of the projected core and struck the far wall. The guild engineer stared at the pillar's unbroken outer shell. He opened the inspection panel, looked through it, and went completely still. The surface dispersed the impact, he said, but the force passed through every layer and opened a hole in the center. He looked at Haru again, this time with the careful expression of someone handling an unknown weapon. That core is rated to withstand level 20 calibration attacks. Pan walked to one side so he could see the clean tunnel through the pillar. New team rule. Nobody stands behind whatever Haru was aiming at. Noah was already examining the tactical meaning. He cannot use it at the start of a fight. No, Haru said. Pressure has to be at least half full. More is better. A miss empties it, and my recovery pauses after release. Nami understood before anyone else finished reacting. So you are still the shield, she said. The difference is that a boss charges the attack that kills it. That was exactly it. A Haru could survive power that other new fighters could not approach. Nami had the speed and offense to create openings. Noah could stabilize Nami's skills and strengthen her for the finish. Pan could find the target, identify danger, and keep the rest of the team from walking blind into it. For the first time, Impact Ledger did not look like a reason Haru had to fight alone. It looked like the center of a team strategy. He opened the Northline roster and confirmed all 4 names. Haru, C-rank Anchor Guard and Captain. Nami, SS rank Sunlancer. Pan, B, rank Shadow Scout. Noah, a rank Contract Link. The empty 5th position remained open. Haru had no reason to fill it merely because it existed. He accepted Grant's invitation to the provincial assessment. The notice updated the moment he did. One additional warning has been added for selected candidates. An unidentified disaster-class creature is searching the coastal region for a stolen pressure signature. Han read the notice over Haru's shoulder. That feels unusually specific. Haru closed it. We should enter the instance before Grant asks me about it. That is not a denial. Nami placed the special key against the center of the calibration room's dungeon frame. Warm light spread through the metal. A gate opened, revealing a stone bridge suspended above a dark sky. 4 paths waited on the other side, woven together in some places and separated in others. Noah formed her contract link with Nami. Golden lines settled around the Sunlancer's armor. Pan disappeared into shadow, reappeared at the front of the group, and looked back with a grin. Haru checked his health. Countercurrent had emptied most of his pressure, and second breath had started working again. Blue current was stable. The storm seed remained sealed in mental storage. I was not entering alone. Nami stepped beside him rather than behind him. Ready, Captain? Haru raised the same C-rank shield that everyone had dismissed during the awakening ceremony. Let's see what your key was hiding. Northline crossed the gate together. Haru had entered trial month as a shield nobody wanted. 3 days later, the team he had chosen was following that shield into danger because attacking Haru was no longer the enemy's path to victory. It was how Haru learned to strike back.